Jacob!
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Tova Pro, where today I will be giving the briefest of overviews on the story DLC that just released for the Callisto Protocol Final Transmission. I would suggest watching my original review for the base game to get an idea of the overall issues I had with the game, link in the description, because in the roughly 3 to 4 hours it took to finish this, it effectively addresses none of the core problems. Also, fair warning, I will be spoiling the entire story, just the DLC, not the main campaign, because honestly, there's not much to spoil here, and quite frankly, it's not worth the $15 price point. We open with our protagonist Jacob Lee having stayed behind on the self-destructing Black Iron prison when Dr. Mahler, responsible for the experiments that turned prisoners into the biophage monsters, tells him there's a way off of Callisto. You're then tasked with collecting her data logs to leave the prison with as a means of exposing the project that was taking place under the guidance of the prison director. So for the duration of the time, you navigate the halls of BIP, collecting data logs and making our way to the transport ship as weirdo shit starts to take place. The biggest detriment comes in the form of the gameplay remaining completely unchanged. The melee combat is extremely rigid, you're still locked into the one-on-one style of fighting even if there's a crowd of monsters, so you can still be pot-shotted from behind after finishing an attack animation. And running is mostly useless because once an enemy has begun an attack, they'll gravitate towards you no matter how much space you've cleared. So your best option is to either dodge your way backwards out of a cluster, which is still a non-timed press left or right to avoid hits mechanic, or use the grip kinesis glove to push enemies away, given that you actually have battery reserve left. It's an utterly narrow gameplay experience that offers very little in the form of strategy or creativity. And the stuff that was added to the DLC is pretty hollow and adds nothing to the formula. The big draw from the teasers was the addition of a new melee weapon, the kinetic hammer, and by golly is it literally just the same weapon with a new coat of paint. The stun baton is actually removed from the second half of the game in favor of the hammer, which is probably a good thing because if you swapped them back and forth during gameplay, you'd find that they act nearly identical to each other. Animations are incredibly similar, if not outright reused, and it consequently contributes to the lack of weight that the hammer should carry. It takes out regular biophages in 1 or 2 swings, which does make it feel like a step up from the baton, but it's missing the impact and feel that the hammer should come with. It swings with the same heft as the baton, and while it takes out destructible objects, it doesn't send enemies and debris flying like it should. Personally, they should have let you keep the baton and switch between them, the baton being the lighter, swifter, albeit less damaging weapon of choice, while the hammer would be the slower of the two to wind up an attack, but having the reward be an insane amount of damage output. The only real reason the hammer is included is so they can slap new weapon in the promotional material, and also as a solution to the new enemy type introduced in the DLC. The Biobot, security robots who have been infused with the biophage virus, is the newest in the enemy lineup, and it really does nothing to liven up the game loop. It walks and fights like any biophage in the game, with the added pattern of occasionally overloading and shooting out an AoE electrical charge. But because switching from attacking to running is so slow, if you catch the charge too late after striking, it's... Oh crap! Crap dang it, this sucks! And it's not like the hammer is the only tool that's useful against them. You're introduced to them while you still have the baton. It's just that the hammer essentially brings them down to the level of biophage grunts with the weapon's output. I think visually they're cool and it helps to give Dr. Mahler a larger presence in the overall story, but combat-wise they're relatively boring. And the final piece of the DLC puzzle is... the puzzles. Fuck this shit! This is perhaps the worst implementation of a puzzle I have ever seen in a game. It is astonishingly bad. Match up the nodes to the middle where they'll turn green and achieve this for every single one, but oh, some will start moving out of place at different intervals. Better hurry because you've got 15 seconds to complete it or it'll hard reset. 15 seconds on the clock, MacGruber! There was one instance where you're about to unlock the kinetic hammer when biobots start breaking into the room. It was fucking impossible, so I figured, well, it's probably because it wants you to fight these things without it, right? No, because you're supposed to unlock it to fend them off. I just thought it was a narrative choice to make the puzzle bullshit. I would take the fucking pipe puzzle minigame from BioShock over this BioSchlock. Fuck you, Glenn!
Ooh, almost got it, so close.
The game looks as good as ever, but it's still plagued by stuttering, weird graphical glitches, and a missing sense of cohesion. going up oddly angled slopes, getting stuck on terrain, and rooms that lend no sense of direction where the platforming is barely explored. Where the original game hosted a variety of locales to explore, Oxidation, Mining Colony, the Prison Tower, every room, hallway, and corridor in this DLC is impossible to differentiate from the next, and because there is still no minimap to access, odds are good that you'll accidentally stumble into the next checkpointed area and miss one of the data logs or valuable goods. The one story beat that I did appreciate was the hallucinations, something that was only hinted at in the main game. Here it's turned up to 10, with loot boxes switching rooms or just vanishing into thin air, repeating corridors, and imaginary enemies coinciding with ones that are actually in front of you. The latter becomes a bit grating in one of the final segments where it's just ongoing wave after wave of biophages, and we all know how much I love the core gameplay, but this is one of the first main areas where the raw power of the hammer is first put on display, so I can only gripe a little bit here. And Josh Duhamel gave it his fucking all. Unironically, the best part of this game. He really leans into this world, even if the dialogue made him out to be this bumbling idiot. I love you, man. You just deserved better than the framework of this story.
Oops, spoiler time, here we go.
As you navigate the prison and collect data logs, Dr. Mahler locates you and is killed by a biobot, fittingly murdered at the hands of her own creation. But when you reach the lower area to the transport ship, you have to fight Dr. Mahler, who has been resurrected by the virus into one of the two-headed brutes. And fuck me, this final boss fight is infuriating. If you get caught in the flurry of projectile attacks, there isn't sufficient time to react solely due to the fact that Jacob Lee is so slow to maneuver, so you simply stand there and take damage for the entire volley. And when you near the end of her health bar, she'll start doing charge attacks where she'll slam into the ground and cause area damage all around you. You're too slow to avoid the range, and in some instances, probably because I wasn't in the middle of dodging or I was attempting to break the chain with a heavy attack, it was a one-hit kill. And dying in this game is aggravating because the load times are still abysmally slow. If you die, you're waiting a minute or two every time to get back into this fight. The mechanics just don't work for this boss fight. You aren't agile enough to avoid a nearly unavoidable attack, so you're constantly taking damage, and the fact that the Dr. Mahler biophage acts as a hallucination means that it can teleport wherever and catch you off guard. It sucks. I cannot stress enough how bad the core gameplay loop is. Anyways, Jacob kills Dr. Mahler, but still hears her on his radio, and boards the transport ship, which turns out to be his crashed ship from the beginning of the game, now completely repaired. As Jacob takes off, we fade out to see that it was all a dream, that in actuality he had nearly succumbed to his injuries getting Danny off of Callisto before Dr. Mahler brought him back to her lab and put him on life support. Using his connection to Danny, Dr. Mahler implanted her confession into Jacob's still working brain to be sent to Danny, the last hope she had to expose the project before Jacob dies of his mortal wounds and Mahler dies under the crumbling prison. I genuinely think this is a fine ending. There's some hubbub going around that there was more to Jacob's story and that killing him off is premature, but the Callisto Protocol is about the experiments and the virus as a whole, an organism that has purportedly been around since the creation of the universe. And if you want to make the case that it is about Jacob, then the story is about his redemption after having been complicit in the illegal projects taking place on Callisto. He has done everything in his power, literally to his dying breath, to right the wrongs that he contributed towards. Plus, I'm a sucker for tragic endings, where the protagonist is put into a hopeless situation, so I think this is as good an ending as Jacob was ever gonna get. Still, a satisfying ending does not make up for the majority of the time being a boring, repetitive slog similar to the original. I remember saying that I saw potential in the season pass if they could fix the main issues, but the additions to the DLC effectively do nothing to alleviate the problems at its core. It's putting a band-aid over a gun wound and saying, "There you go, all better." Unfortunately, I have to give this game my worst rating. A sigh, a shake of the head, and then saying, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. I sincerely never want to play this game ever again. Please save your money for the remake of Dead Space 2, where they will hopefully retcon Isaac Clarke to be bisexual. At least, a man can dream. Hey guys, thanks for checking out this quick review. In all seriousness, I would just skip this as a whole. If you're looking for real horror recommendations, take a look at Dead Space, the recent RE4 remake, or Amnesia the Bunker. And if you didn't know, I streamed most of Final Transmission on Twitch, so head on over to twitch.tv/ToverPro and give me a follow so you never miss a stream.
I hate Skyline Stumble. This one fucking sucked. Let me on! Let me the fuck on! What is wrong with this game? Let me on! Dude, it's... Let me on! Let me on! Let me on! Let me on, dude! It's God fucking damn it!
You guys have a good day, take care, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.